This week at Council, autism treatment funding, Halton Hills declares a climate crisis, our mayor quotes Dr. Seuss, and where does Halton Hills want you to grow your weed? All this and more coming up on... What's up, everyone? My name's Chris Golden, and welcome to our first edition of What's Up with Council. The date is May 7th, 2019. Council took place last night, Monday, May 6th. And what an eventful meeting it was. It started off with a delegation of concerned citizen Maxine Verge-Payne, who is the mother of an autistic child. She asked Council to send a message to the Ford government and the Ministry of Children, Community, and Social Services.
My name is Maxine Payne, and I am a resident in the town of Halton Hills. I am an autism and disability advocate, but most of all, I am a mom to an amazing little boy, Dylan. At the age of 3, Dylan was diagnosed with a very rare genetic disorder called ATR16 and autism. He is nonverbal, has developmental delay, and intellectual disability. On February the 6th, 2019, the Ontario Progressive Government made big changes to the Ontario Autism Program. My son, Dylan, will go from receiving 27 hours of intensive ABA therapy per week, which costs approximately $80,000 a year, to receiving no therapy. The allotted $5,000 a year that the PC government has offered will not even cover 1 hour of therapy per week. Can you possibly begin to imagine the impact that this will have on him as an individual and his outcome in life once it's no longer available to him? My family and our autism community is reaching out to you and all of elected representatives to advocate on our behalf. We are in crisis mode. We are asking for you to pass a motion to send correspondence and a resolution to the Ministry of Children, Community, and Social Services, as well as the Premier, Doug Ford, asking them to suspend the rollout of the new redesigned OAP program until better options and consultations with all stakeholders have taken place. We need to have a publicly funded needs-based therapy model that will ensure every individual with an autism or disability diagnosis will receive what is clinically prescribed. We need to ensure that families are no longer bankrupting themselves, selling their homes, or having to make the difficult decision to uproot their lives and move out of province or country to receive the medically prescribed therapies that our children need.
This was followed by a notice of motion by Councillor Somerville, which was passed unanimously by Council.
This is the resolution. It's moved by Councillor Somerville and seconded by Mayor Burnett. Whereas, according to the National Autism Spectrum Disorder Surveillance System, NASS, autism spectrum disorder, and I'll refer to it as ASD in the future, is one of the most common developmental disabilities in Canada. 1 in 66 children is diagnosed with ASD. And whereas, according to the Canadian Medical Association Journal, approximately 1% of the Canadian population is affected by ASD, which means there are approximately 100,000 Ontarians on the autism spectrum. And whereas ASD changes over time in its expressions, challenges, and delights, Ontario must be prepared to support children, youth, and adults within the context of development, learning, family, and community. Supportive, understanding, and inclusive communities ensure that each person with ASD is provided the means to achieve quality of life as a respected member of society. And whereas Ontarians must support the individual needs of a person with ASD throughout their lifespan using evidence-based treatment and intervention while remembering that developmental trajectories are constantly changing. And whereas the supports and services for adults on the spectrum are inadequate and fragmented and fail to address needs across entire lifespans. And whereas school boards are expecting an influx of about 1,000 students with autism as families lose funding, leaving educators unequipped with the resources required to provide specialized care and a higher level of assistance for children with special needs. And whereas funding will not address the critical need for assistance for families not only in their younger years but after the age of 18. And whereas the changes which will come into effect April 1st will mean the thousands of families currently receiving services will see drastic cutbacks. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Halton Hills formally requests the Minister of Children, Community, Community and Social Services suspend implementation of its proposed plan and continue to identify and advocate for a sustainable funding plan for families with individuals with ASD to ensure adequate resources for applied behavioral analysis and needed therapies. And further, that the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services work collaboratively with families, community partners, and stakeholders to develop a funding plan which will guarantee every person with ASD has access to funding, specialized programming, and service providers.
My heart was breaking when I was contacted by Maxine, because when you start reading and thinking of someone taking their life savings and having a glimmer of hope with a child, and hearing about it would be $80,000 a year, it just tells you that there's no way you can have balancing budgets and doing things like that on the backs of the most vulnerable in our communities, and it's just not right.
Next, there were multiple delegations to council by concerned citizens and environmental groups in support of the council resolution to declare a climate crisis.
I'm Dr. Leslie Barron. I'm a general surgeon who works actually just down the road at the hospital, and I'm here to speak for the motion to have the town of Halton Hills declare a climate change emergency.
My name is Lisa Kohler. I'm the Executive Director of the Halton Environmental Network.
My name's Leslie Adams, and I'm representing the Ontario Environment Network. I am currently the co-chair. I want to thank council and staff for taking these steps that we need so desperately to take right now.
My name is Doris Trelevin. I'm president of POWER, Protect Our Water and Environmental Resources.
Hello everyone, my name is Spencer Lippa, and I'm here to speak to you today about climate change.
Councillor Fogel brought forth the resolution to declare a climate emergency. This was seconded by Councillor Somerville, which council also unanimously supported.
First, the town of Halton Hills set a goal to be a net zero municipality by 2030. Second, the update to the Halton Hills Green Building Standards be strengthened and tools be investigated to incentivize the construction of R2000 or LEED Platinum standard or net zero buildings. 3, the town fleet transition to electric vehicles whenever possible and as soon as possible. 4, the town encouraged staff and the public to switch to plug-in vehicles by installing more EV charging stations at town facilities, beginning with the town hall, and further strategies be considered to encourage the switch to electric and high-efficiency vehicles by the public, such as preferred parking spots. 5, that staff investigate new standards to be included in site plan and secondary plans that move the town towards a goal of achieving net zero emissions by 2030. 6, plans for future growth be predicted on a most energy efficient model, taking into consideration transportation emissions, opportunities for green energy development, and the importance of preserving high quality agricultural land. 7, that the role of a healthy ecosystem, including its important function of sequestering carbon, be recognized as fundamental to any climate change plan by measures such as expanding tree planting and maintenance budgets. Number 8, that a climate change task force comprised of local experts, conservation authorities, business leaders, and community leaders, youth, faith organizations, nonprofit organizations, Indigenous representation, educators, and others be formed, taking advantage of expertise and community knowledge to assist in formulating and delivering a community-wide plan to reduce carbon emissions. Number 9, that a plan be made to inform and engage the residents and businesses in becoming part of the solution to this emergency. 10, that Halton Region be requested to become a partner in helping to reduce overall emissions in Halton Hills and adopt carbon reduction goals for the region as a whole, and that this be considered a principle in the regional official plan review. 11, that the Halton District School Board and Halton Catholic District School Board be requested to become partners and adopt carbon reduction goals for the region as a whole. 12, that progress towards reducing overall carbon emissions originating in Halton Hills be reported annually to Council. 13, that the Mayor write to the Premier urging the provincial government to strengthen the Ontario Building Code with respect to energy efficiencies and to create incentives for energy efficiency retrofits for both residential buildings and commercial industrial buildings, and introduce incentives to hasten the shift in transportation away from fossil fuels. 14, that all Canadian municipalities be challenged to pass similar resolutions specific to their locality, challenges, and opportunities to respond to the climate emergency.
So we did have a significant list of things that can and should be done. In my opinion, to do all or many of these things, people will have to adopt an attitude that they are not passive bystanders who think that the government will look after things and that business left to its own devices will do the right thing. We have enough evidence to the contrary.
Unless someone like you cares a whole lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. And that's Dr. Seuss the Lorax.
Next, there was a presentation about downtown Georgetown. This was designed to inform and consult the community. This was more or less boring, but we did get to see some pictures of what the future of Georgetown might look like.
In terms of the buildings, we do talk about low-rise buildings and what they might look like in various forms. Mid-rise 1 buildings, which are that 3 to 6 story type, and then the mid-rise 2 buildings that can go from 6 to 12 stories.
Following that, there was a presentation by Keith Hamilton about the town's proposed plan for regulation of cannabis cultivation in Halton Hills.
Okay, at this point in the presentation, I'd now like to discuss the results of the public survey. Again, from the survey was open to the public through Let's Talk Halton Hills platform from December 18th of 2018 to January 16th of 2019.
The presentation was ultimately summarized by 3 options, all of which would include site plans. The contrast between the 3 options was in what areas rezoning would need to take place. The areas mentioned were agricultural, rural, or employment areas. The recommended option for council was option B, hoping that council would vote for rezoning for cannabis cultivation of just rural and agricultural areas.
So as I mentioned, the preferred option is option B. In my opinion, the rezoning need is much more critical within the agricultural rural areas than it is in the employment areas. The potential for these buildings to be large is not lost on me. And in my opinion, there is a need to consider the size of the facility as part of a process, and not knowing what proponents may want to develop on their lands. I think an abundance of caution with respect to permitting these facilities in the rural area is the way to go.
Lastly, Council unanimously voted for the provincial government to maintain their funding to the Credit Valley Conservation Authority. This came after the provincial government cut their funding by 50%.
Whereas conservation authorities, CAs, have a mandate to prevent, mitigate, and forecast flooding within their respective watersheds. And whereas provincial funding transfer payments have traditionally been provided to assist CAs with addressing their core mandate, namely flood forecasting and hazard area management. And whereas impacts decreases to CA's budget flood forecasting would result in an increased risk to members of the public associated with a property damage, personal injury, and possibly loss of life. And whereas CA's sources of funding have been a combination of the province and municipalities within their watershed, and whereas provincial transfer payments have been reduced by 50% for 2019 after CA's budgets have already been approved, and whereas municipalities would be forced to assume the costs of replacing the money removed from provincial transfer payments to CAs, and whereas municipal budgets have been impacted in the past from downloading provincial services onto the property tax base, created an additional burden of property taxes, and whereas the Conservation Halton would see a loss of $145,000 that would transfer to the municipal regional levy as a result in a 1.5% increase in its budget request from its watershed funding municipalities. And whereas Credit Valley Conservation Authority would see a loss of $90,000 that would transfer to the municipal region level and result in a 0.5% increase in the budget request from its watershed funding municipalities. Therefore, be it resolved that Mayor Rick Bonnet write to the Minister of Natural Resources to express
council's concerns related to the loss of the provincial funding, the downloading of additional burden onto the property taxpayer, and request that this decision be reversed.
Will council vote for option B? Will farmers be able to grow some sticky icky? Will the climate crisis and the provincial government cause the next Noah's Ark in Ontario? Will our mayor read more Dr. Seuss? You can find out all this and more in a future episode of... Thank you, everyone. My name's Chris Golden, and always stay up. Good day.